The Lady in the Purple Dress by J. Christopher Van Vleer. Narrated by Otis Gyrie. Thomas Sloane had died in his sleep. When his relatives arrived 2 days before the funeral, his servant, an old man by the name of Ramsley, said he had mentioned something about a woman in a purple dress before he went to bed that night. His son, Richard, looked up with a look of disturbance on his face. "I remember a purple-dressed woman." As his family crowded around, he told his mother and his relatives the tale by memory. It was a night when the thunder and lightning shot out from the heavens, shaking the very foundations of the house. The house was lit by lamps and a few candles, and they cast eerie shadows throughout. I was sitting with Dad by the fireplace across from those giant glass windows. I heard a noise and looked out, and saw a car come up through the gate and park in the drive. The door opened, and a young woman stepped out. I had never seen someone like her before. She had long, silvery blonde hair, and her eyes were blacker than pitch. Her face was so unusual. She looked almost like an etching in the flesh. She came up and rang the bell, and my father let her in. He told me to go to bed, but curious about this strange woman, I instead hid on a love seat that had its back to the fire and peeked over at them. The woman wore a dress, purple dress, like you would expect to see on a woman from the 1930s, not the 1980s. I wasn't sure if my father was having an affair with this woman or something. They didn't act like a romantic couple. My father just put on an old album of swing music, and the two of them slow danced with this melancholy look on both their faces. Eventually she left, and my father retired to bed, at which point I snuck upstairs, pulled on my pajamas, hopped into bed, and went to sleep. For the next year and a half, this would happen once a month. She would come over and dance with my father, always with this sad, lonely look on their faces, while I hid and watched. One time my father stepped out to answer the phone. Who was calling that late at night? I have no idea. And suddenly the woman walked over to the love seat and looked me in the eyes. I panicked, because I felt I would get in trouble for sure. Instead, she gave me a peck on the lips and put a finger to her lips, and she smiled. I ducked back down and watched as she walked back as my father re-entered the room, looking like he had been given some grave news. They danced for the next 40 minutes, and then she left, but before she did, she took my father's hand and put a gold ring on it. That was the last time I ever saw her, and I think it was the last time my father saw her as well, because every night he would look out those giant windows as if expecting her, but she never came again. I simply forgot about her, except when I would catch a glimpse of the gold ring in my father's right hand. As Richard finished, Ramsley came forward and said, "As it so happens, Master Richard, your father gave me a note in addition to his will saying that the ring was to go to you." He pulled the ring out of his pocket and handed it to Richard, who promptly placed it on his left hand and began to speak with his family about who the strange woman could have been. His brother suggested that she was their father's mistress, but that didn't seem likely. As Richard had pointed out, they never did anything but dance. His uncle suggested she was an old friend from the university, since Thomas had always been more at ease around women. Eventually, they decided to put it out of their minds and focus on the funeral. That night, Richard awoke to the sounds of footsteps in his room. He opened his eyes and saw the woman whom he had described to his relatives earlier, but she looked exactly the same as she had 30 years prior. He went to make a sound, but she placed a hand over his mouth and once again placed a finger to her smiling lips. She then kissed him for the second time in his life, but this was a longer kiss filled with lust and hunger. As he returned the kiss, he heard in his mind, "You are mine, always, my little one." After that, he blacked out. In the morning, Richard woke up alone. He looked around and saw his room as it had been the night before. He decided the memory had sparked a dream, shrugged it off, and then got dressed and went downstairs to join his relatives. But for the rest of the day, he felt a slight burning sensation coming from the ring on his finger. After the funeral ended the next day, all the Sloane family departed and went their separate ways. Richard felt a slight burn from the ring, but after clasping his hand over it, the pain stopped. He walked slowly to his car with Ramsley. Had either of them looked behind them, they would have seen standing on a hill a woman with pitch-black eyes, blonde hair, and a purple dress. Many people heard the story from Richard's relatives, and it became something of a local legend. Whoever she was, no one knew, but some say if you walk past Richard's home at night, you may see him staring out the window or hearing the beating of his father's dead, broken heart.